The next question is, I am not sure what is difference between metta, loving kindness, and karuna, compassion. Can you explain this? Okay, so here the person asking this is coming from I'm just guessing, that coming from the angle that he thinks that loving kindness and compassion are the same. He's not too sure what's the difference, so now he wants to learn about the difference. Actually, the best person to explain this is Bhante Punnaji. So I'm going to let Bhante Punnaji explain this to you. So first, let's listen to Bhante Punnaji explain what is metta. Bhante translate metta with a number of phrases. One is universal benevolence, another one is goodwill, another one is loving kindness, but they all basically mean the same thing, the concern for the well-being of others, right?
The teaching of the Buddha is based on what is called metta. Metta is the Pali word. The Sanskrit word is Maitri. And that word means universal goodwill or universal benevolence or a universal interest in the welfare of all beings, a concern about the welfare of all beings. That means it is a broad mind, not a narrow mind. So the 5 precepts are practiced not to avoid punishment or to gain rewards. The 5 precepts are practiced because we are concerned about the welfare of others. The 5 precepts are mainly concerned about how we relate to other people. All that is based on how we relate to other people. It is based on a concern for the welfare of all beings, not only thinking about ourselves. It is based on a broad mind. That breadth of mind is what is called metta or maitri. This is why I call it universal benevolence or universal goodwill. Metta cannot be only for human beings, with no compassion for animals. That is not metta. Metta is for all beings. It is a concern for the welfare of all beings. That is the broad mind, where we think of all beings. It is very important to understand this because the morality or ethics of the teachings of the Buddha is based on a broad mind. And when we cultivate metta, we are cultivating a broad mind.
When we cultivate metta, we are cultivating a broad mind, a concern for the well-being of all beings, for the welfare of all beings. Basically, it's about reaching out, spreading out, so the length and the breadth of it. That's really what Bhante meant. Now, metta is part of the 4 divine dwellings, Chattari Brahma Vihara. And it is also called the 4 immeasurables, Apamanya. Okay, so basically, metta, universal benevolence, followed by karuna, compassion, selfless giving, then followed by mudita, which is altruistic or selfless happiness, and upeka, which is the equanimity of mind or the mental equilibrium, the stillness of mind to the state where you are able to see through the realities of life. So basically, these are the 4 divine dwellings. Now, although Bhante did not publicly mention it, but in my discussions with Bhante Punaji when he was still around, he mentioned that the Arahant, a person who has attained enlightenment, the mind is constantly within these 4 states. That's why it's called divine dwellings, the 4 divine dwellings. The mind of the Arahant is constantly within all these 4 states. That person, that the Arahant has a very broad mind, concern for all beings, and has depth, right? Karuna is the depth dimension, and deep compassion for all beings, and experiences altruistic happiness. This is not the happiness from pleasures, but the happiness from being selfless. And finally, a state of mind which is very still and calm, equanimous, right? Luminous mind. So this is really the mind of the Arahant that's constantly in these 4 states. That's why it's called the 4 immeasurables. You cannot imagine what they are like. And in fact, the Buddha did point out in one of the sutras, there are 4 things you cannot really explain. If you try to explain it or debate about it, you could go crazy talking about it. And basically, it's the mind of an Arahant, right, in these 4 states. So now let's listen to what Bhante has to say about the Karuna part, the second part. Okay.
And when we cultivate metta, metta turns into karuna. Karuna is not another kind of thought or a different kind of mental state. Karuna is an expansion of metta. Metta grows into karuna. When we practice metta, metta grows into karuna. Then what is karuna? Karuna is where we don't distinguish between ourselves and others. That others are as important as ourselves. Karuna is like the depth dimension. Metta is like the length and breadth, the area dimension. And Karuna is how deeply are we interested in the welfare of all beings. Just as a mother thinks of her only child, and is even willing to sacrifice her own life for the sake of this child. In the same way, we begin to become concerned about the welfare of all beings, and we lose our selfishness. In Karuna, the selfishness disappears. Just like a river falling into the ocean and loses its identity. It becomes the water of the ocean. The river is no more. In the same way, when Karuna appears, the self disappears. And that disappearance of self means all unhappiness disappears. Because all unhappiness is self-centered.
All unhappiness is self-centered. So when we practice Karuna, which is the depth dimension, then all the self-centeredness disappears. Okay. So we were to look at these four Brahma Viharas. Now, it is possible that when you practice Metta and you deepen your practice to Karuna, and if you continue to practice, and you will realize eventually attainment of Upekkha. When you reach that state, then it is possible to become enlightened through liberation by wisdom, right? So this is Bhante would explain that the cultivation of Brahma Vihara, going beyond Karuna. That means you're not only just practicing compassion, now you are going beyond that. So let's listen to Bhante's explanation of going beyond that, right?
When Karuna comes up, your self disappears. And when the self disappears, all unhappiness disappears. Because all unhappiness is self-centered. So when all unhappiness disappears, you are happy. And that happiness is not an emotional excitement. The emotional excitement disappears. The mind becomes calm and tranquil. So it is the happiness of tranquility of mind. That happiness of tranquility of mind is centered within. It is not a reaction to what is going on outside. The happiness that is centered within is not disturbed or agitated by the changing circumstances of life. The changing vicissitudes of life, gain and loss, fame and ill fame, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. These are the changing vicissitudes of life. The 8 changing vicissitudes of life. Atta loka dhamma. Atta loka dhamma. Your mind is not shaken by these changing vicissitudes of life. The mind is tranquil within, and this tranquility within is focused within. This is really, you have entered the 4th jhana. The Metta meditation properly developed is the 1st jhana. Karuna properly developed is the 2nd jhana. Mudita properly developed is the 3rd jhana. Upekka properly developed is the 4th jhana.
Very interesting that Bhante pointed out, right? Just 1 minute. Yeah. Very interesting that Bhante pointed out that when Metta, now I'm paraphrasing Bhante. He says is the 1st jhana, but I'm paraphrasing. What I believe he really meant is Metta, when cultivated and developed, leads you to attain the 1st jhana. Karuna, when cultivated and developed, can lead you to attain the 2nd jhana. Mudita, when cultivated and developed, can lead you to attain the 3rd jhana. And Upekka, when cultivated and developed, can lead you to attain the 4th jhana. And at the 4th jhana, you are now at the doorstep of awakening. So it is possible that with this practice, this regimen of practice, it is possible to gain enlightenment. Right? When you reach the 4th jhana, then you are at the doorstep of awakening. You can become enlightened by wisdom. So basically, that brings the end of my presentation. Now you can actually, when the tiny.cc website is up running again, you can go to this link and see the complete discussion by Bhante on the Brahma Vihara, because what I showed here is just a clip that I took from there. So you can see the longer discussion, which came from the most thorough meditation retreat he ever did back in December 2017. Many of us were very fortunate to have attended. The reason why is that at that time, in December 2017, there was a group of monks from overseas, from yeah, never mind. I forgot the place. Anyway, there was a group of monks who came from overseas, 4 monks who came from overseas, and they attended that retreat. And Bhante was actually very inspired to give a very deep teaching. During that retreat, Bhante taught some very deep things. So if you go to Bhante Punaji's YouTube and look up the 9-day meditation retreat that happened in December 2017, that series of recordings I did, and it so happened that that was the only time when I recorded every single thing that happened. So there were a lot of gems. So if you go to Bhante Punaji's YouTube channel and look for the 9-day meditation retreat that happened in December 2017, this was just 6 months before Bhante passed away, actually. So you will find some real gems in there, right?